This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right,
it is not. It is a receiver of thought.
because love is my first technique.
It's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, coming to you from an altitude of 5,280 feet in Mile High territory. And I am so overjoyed that you're here with us. Make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss any Mile High tick. And of course, make sure you have dialed in to be at Mile High in June. We're moving it to June 3rd to 6th. 2021. I know by then you're going to want to be out in community with other great chiropractic teams. And I am so thrilled to have our guest today, the one and only, almost needs no introduction in chiropractic, Dr. David Fletcher, the president of CLA, the Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, who I am a huge fan of, supporter of, besides the fact that I just absolutely adore Dr. David and his message. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Dave.
Oh, honestly, Danny, I clear the deck whenever I have a chance, A, to talk to you, B, to relate it to Mile High, but mostly because we adore chiropractic about at the same level. So this is just one of the most fun things that I can do is get together with you.
Well, it's great to have everybody listen in on our conversation. And with that, we're celebrating 125 years into chiropractic, which is pretty amazing to go into this. And I feel CLA is on the forefront of outcome assessments for chiropractic and subluxation analysis. Let's let people get to know you that may not know you as well. A short version of how you found your way to chiropractic and to CLA.
Absolutely. Well, I think that my story is probably similar to many, many others, who come out. I got into chiropractic because it wasn't medicine, enjoyed the idea of being in healthcare, accepted medicine, said, no, that's not my path personally. Wasn't sure about the academic rigor because I was trained in mathematics and everything else. And I thought, but I really want to help people. And so I ended up choosing chiropractic. I had gone to a chiropractor all my life, but had never been taught really the big story. And as a result of that, got into CMCC and got into chiropractic and came out really wanting to be a world beater, world changer when it came to sports and performance. That was sort of my dream, was to really get into that one. And so the key word there wasn't sports, it was performance. And as I started to investigate what human performance through, again, a chiropractic lens, because CMCC at that time wasn't necessarily lost as it is today. But the realities were is that, Danny, I fell in love with understanding how indeed we could bring this message of chiropractic through this performance message. And, when you're dealing with high-level athletes, whether they're Olympians or professionals or otherwise, I started to learn the interface of technologies. And at that time, the technologies were a little bit more than a goniometer, even, when we started. And I started to introduce myself outside of CLA, but into the EMG realm. And I started to have this desire to learn what was going on in the neuromuscular realm. Well, about at that same time, I started to find out that there's a little more to chiropractic than neuromuscular. And as a result of that, I started to really open my perspective. And, I think that you said it best, is that perspective has taken me today to understand that when we start talking chiropractic, it has virtually no limitations because its realm is really human potential. Healthcare is too narrow. So in preparation for our call today, I put myself in, you're supposed to surround yourself with the people you love and the things you love. And so in my office, thank you, by the way, for inviting me because I love you. Thank you for inviting me on a Saturday to come into this because up here is Dee Dee, over here is BJ, and that's Travels with BJ and First Edition. And there's the Insight, which is there, and there's Fred Barge over here. And I feel surrounded on the 125th, birthday of chiropractic to be surrounded by the people I love and the things that matter to me. So let me ask you a question, Dan.
Sure.
And it was posited on I think a Facebook post. It said, would Dee Dee be proud of where chiropractic was at year 125? What do you think?
I think he would be very not proud, would be my opinion. I would think that he would be very dismayed at where maybe that had grown, that his child had grown, that had birthed into the vastness that it is. Probably there's some pride about that. However, that it's so distant from his foundational principles and values, especially, we're talking across the border in Canada. He's a Canadian, right? And which a lot of people forget, because Iowa and Dee Dee was a Canadian. I feel like a lot of the heart, soul, spirit, and of chiropractic is kind of a ghost. Then, especially in the education realm, there's a few institutions that carry that. That would be where I would think. And I also think that doesn't mean all things are lost. I think it means, because I see the people that say, well, we got to just throw in the towel or something like that. There's no hope. I'm not on that side of the fence. However, what I do think is it means that we have to be even a brighter light and help bring people that maybe didn't get exposed to chiropractic principles to the light.
Yeah, listen, you know what? I've got some thoughts here. And I think that, you and I sit in an interesting perspective. Number one, you and I both are founders. You're a founder of Mile High. Myself, I'm founder of the new CLA and founder of so many different things. And I think that if we look at Dee Dee, and to some degree BJ, but to Dee Dee as a founder, I think one of the things we recognize, and I speak this to those listening to us on this podcast as well, because the truth of it is that each of us are a founder of our practice and how we're going to be a chiropractor in the community. You start with the base minimum and you kind of go, gosh, we're still alive. It was a good enough idea that we're still there. And I think after 125 years, there has to be a celebration to say that despite all the foibles and all the hiccups and all the nicks and burrs that happen in chiropractic, we're alive and actually doing pretty well. I know that it isn't the message that was meant to be. But I think that what I've come to learn is that there are really two groups. It started out as the straights and the mixers, back in the BJ era. But I really see it as this, is that it's the creatives and the non-creatives. And I really see the creatives are where we are. In other words, we take the message that is so pure, which is the realities of human potential as we understand innate and the mental impulse and the ability for us to arouse innate with an adjustment. And we build the creative side of that to say, without losing what matters, let's see if we can evolve with it. I don't have to mention the name Donnie Epstein too far to say that's exactly what happened when Donnie, this massive creative, was introduced to chiropractic and then was able to elevate his vision of chiropractic through what he started with, beginning with NSA, etc. And I think that you take a look at Dr. Kent and Dr. Jen Tempo and myself and others, and we took our vision of it, and your vision of it led you through this creative side, which is there. I think the non-creatives are the people who sit with dogma and get caught in this whirlpool, which is a deadly whirlpool of trying to prove what it isn't, instead of trying to imagineer what it is. And I think it's really critical that we don't necessarily divide this into those that understand it and those that don't. Naturally, we're creative. Dee Dee, as I can, paraphrase my belief system, understood that he was a spark. I think he took what he had, which was a magnetic healer. I think what he took, which was that he was damn a good Canadian, and that he ended up understanding that he had few answers, but great ideas. And that as a creative, he said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could rally some people around my idea? I don't think he ever thought that in the early days, from Davenport and otherwise, that it could be what it is today, meaning worldwide, one of the most dominant voices within healthcare, at least. And I'm gonna sit down and say another thing that I learned. because I rub shoulders with a lot of people in business and a lot of people in medicine and otherwise too, outside of where we are. We're a young profession at 125. Right. You know what? Yes, we've had a lot going on, but damn, we're creative. We've been adaptable to be where we are. So would I think that Didi's roiling around in his grave, wondering what happened to Car? Probably. It's not the storyline he had. But would he be proud of the fact that certain people have carried the flag in a creative way and built it to be something that is still of reckoning? Sure.
And then that brings something to, beyond Didi. We'll go to another person in the lineage that you actually have on your right, which is BJ. So BJ Palmer brought a new thing that was really not to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, to the world of chiropractic, which was outcome assessments in terms of an instrumentation. BJ Palmer brought forth instrumentation in its infancy to the chiropractic profession. There may be some other kinds of outcome assessments that were moderately done prior to that. However, that was a big leap. And he also brought this concept of timing, that there was something about timing, which brought a whole new dimension to a subluxation analysis that wasn't there before. So that is evolution. And there's something about, I've been thinking a lot about the art of chiropractic. And we can be dogmatic about the philosophy, and we can be dogmatic about the art and dogmatic about the science. All those things have to evolve and grow. And outcome assessments, what part do you feel outcome assessments have to do with the art of chiropractic?
Well, it's great. If we take a look at the technology interface in the evolution through the philosophy of the art of chiropractic, obviously in 1895, the Röntgen was at the same time as we were having Palmer discuss chiropractic, Röntgen was figuring out X-ray. So the two meshed perfectly. And because, in the writings of Didi in the earliest days, he talked about racking a bone into position, there was this sense that it was of structure. And at that time, the instrumentation that was available was, or at least the technology that was available, was associated with structure. And it was about, and we need Simon in on this because Simon would give us the exact to the minute date, but the realities were that the first instrumentation that started to come up were the extension of these sensors into about 1923 being the Palmer Clinic introducing thermography. And at that time, they talked about the hot boxes, and they weren't talking about inflammation. They were talking about nerves that were under extreme tension. And they could feel, not necessarily palpating, they could feel the congestion of the tissues when they would run their hands, either the back of their hands or the digits, along the spine. And again, they weren't talking about fixations. They were talking about the tonality and the tension on the nerves causing a hot box. And so out of that, they created this thermopile that was this relationship between right side and left side. When you compare the tension on the nerve on the right side to the left side. So thermography evolved in that moment in what was called a thermopile. And the only way that you could get thermography in your office was that if you were a graduate of the Palmer system, and if you could lease this the neurothermograph to the, as that. And so that was a hell of a source of revenue for the Palmer Clinic. But they were beautiful. Actually, Dr. Kent has one, and they are amazing. And you know what I want to say is that in that 1923 version, I think he has like a 1936 version or something like this, one of the probes is pediatric. So this idea that chiropractic pediatrics is something new and, evolving just because, it's that, no. Children were scanned in the earliest of days for subluxation. Mm-hmm. What we came across, and I mean, Didi got lost trying to, in instrumentation, determine the mental impulse. And that's where he tried to, develop the indescribable neuromentifograph, or with 13 different syllables I'm missing on that one. But the truth is that instrumentation, for the purpose of understanding not things of the spine, but things of the consciousness, in other words, and of the tone of the nervous system, came out very clearly. And that's when we start to see infrared cameras come in and replace the thermopiles. We start to see EMG come in, which, as I said, I introduced myself outside of chiropractic to. And the latest evolution is what you have on your wrist. I'm not wearing mine, but is heart rate variability. And when we start to take a look at this development of a neural profile, and we apply it through that philosophy that was sculpted through BJ especially, and codified through Stevenson, we start to see that the triune of life, which is force, matter, and intelligence coming together, you gotta have a way to transmit force, and that's neurology. And so that's where we sit with the instrumentation and philosophy.
And I'm going to tell a little story here, which makes this a little less of an interview, but I love conversing with you.
Oh, no, it's perfect.
You may not know some of this. So since you mentioned network and you mentioned Donnie Epstein, a lot of people don't realize this, that he really developed his protocols with X-ray and instrumentation. In the first network seminars, he was an upper cervical practitioner. He was using an NCM, and then he was trying to find where an NCM, a DTG, and a toughness lens all agreed. That was he would use all three of those on people every visit and see where to adjust. And so he developed, because he really wanted to have a neurological impact. And then he had an instrument that he developed and sold, which was an Atlas faucet differential. And you would hold the Atlas faucet differential, and depending on the reading difference, correlating that with the leg length patterns, that would determine where to analyze. And that was the precursor to the phasing system. And people in the early network seminars, they would purchase this Atlas faucet differential, and they would, between every adjustment contact, do this Atlas faucet reading to determine what area might have the potential interference and to intervene. So there's part of that. I've heard him over and over again saying, like, that part of him getting good with his hands was using all of those tools, right, to know where and when and such. When I first got my instrumentation, which was the subluxation station Millennium back in 1997. Yeah, something like that. Was it when I got that? I remember this thought to myself of, what if I suck? What if I do these readings? Because there was another or evolution of network where there was an anti any instrumentation. You just need these, no instruments, no x-rays, all of that kind of thing. And I thought, I was excited to have this. And I said, what if I suck? What if I do this and those things don't change? And I remember, because it's an accountability. Instrumentation gives you an accountability beyond a pop, beyond the person feeling better. Does the person, whatever instrumentation it is. And I remember, I feel so strongly that using some kind of objective indicator relative to subluxation analysis and spinal neurosurgery helps you become better at the art, regardless of what technique you do.
Well, listen, I think that one of the things you have to realize, whether it's, looking at instrumentation or using these digital, examination tools right here, is you have to put it down under these two parameters, validity and reliability. I mean, that's how we measure reproducibility comes as a result of validity and reliability. First off, and the great Christopher Kent taught me validity by saying this, is that you don't weigh a patient with a rectal thermometer. That's Chris at his best, right? So he would say, look, you have to use instrumentation that allows you to determine what you want to find out. And so if you're using thermography in an NCM or a DTG model, which is neurocalorimetrics and dermathermographic, meaning one's lateralization, one's verticalization, the realities is that you are not looking for inflammatory responses and fixation reactions. You're looking for the tone of, in this case, the sympathetic motor nervous system. And so that is one of the parameters, or one of the D's as he would introduce it, to what is a model of a subluxation. And the second, and this is back in 1997 when we both started with the subluxation station, he added the second D in terms of validity, which was associated with dyskinesia. In other words, the range of movement was associated there. And the third D was dyskinesis, which wasn't about whether there was a tight muscle here or a tight muscle there. It was energy expenditure and energy wasting through the postural neuromuscular system. So again, it's one thing to get it. So those are the validity things of where you're building a neural profile, like faucet temperature. You're not measuring temperature, you're measuring the tonality you are measuring temperature for the purpose, though, of understanding if the body is in a reactive phase or a calm or ease phase. And so one of the things that you have to then do with technology is determine reliability. So let's go way back to X-ray. And X-ray's reliability is not based upon, measuring biometric function. It's looking at static states of pathology. That's what it is. I mean, you are looking at a very complex system having gone through change. You're looking at historical remnants in a snapshot. And when we take a look at electrodiagnostic, if you can use that term, but electrobiometric testing, what you're really looking at is a more dynamic way of doing it, because you can take snapshots in time and do comparatives. So here's the thing you said, Danny, when you said I was worried I was going to suck, is that we all do. The truth of that is that you're checking on reproducibility and reliability, because you already had validity built into it. But here's what I've learned in probably being the most knowledgeable person on the planet at this time when it comes to understanding neurofunctional testing in a chiropractic realm, is that if you adjust with intent a primary subluxation, however you want to describe that, through your analysis, but that you're working on a subluxation and not a secondary subluxation, which might be confusing you as a compensation or something of a fixation or of the structure first. But when you clear a true subluxation, whether it be at a fossa or somewhere else, wherever your analysis takes you, your neural tone reorganizes and changes dramatically. I can't say instantly, but dramatically. And scans, as we call them, which are these complex images that you see of the neurofunctional tone of that person, they reorganize to a more efficient state, without a doubt. Meaning that's the reliability. So people who suck, using your terminology, but people who suck at trying to pretend that they're a chiropractor and use technology get very frustrated, because it tends to tell the truth. And so one of the lectures that I was putting together, actually I was going to do it at Mile High, but that's how life goes, it's called Truth Serum. The good old spy movies, they would give you a truth serum. But technology is a truth serum. It teaches you, and we're talking about the craft and the skills of whatever it is. It's an honest system, because if you're not clearing, those scans aren't changing, or at least aren't changing to a more efficient state over time.
Right. Absolutely. And that's your opportunity for growth. It's your opportunity for growth to say, okay, why is that not changing? What can I do differently? If you are accountable to what you find, because I still have times where I'm like, wait, this pattern isn't changing. And I will say this, and this may be anecdotal, the handful of 3-4 times in my 20-year span where I was like, the person's pattern was not changing and it was puzzling me for months and months. All of them had something that was a terminal diagnosis that's frowned out. All of them. That was not, that it was a cancer or something like that. That was not, this was a bigger thing that had not revealed yet in typical, they hadn't gone down the differential diagnostic route, So it's the opportunity to also help the practice member to say, wait a second, these things are real. And if they're not changing and I'm doing an outstanding job, how else does a person's health have to be obsessed? Because we're not all things to all people, right? Yes, it is too limited to be just health, not human potential. However, we have a license as a healthcare provider, and it was something unusual. there can be things at that, or maybe they have to see another type of chiropractor. Maybe you're
absolutely
right, because our first thing is to service to the practice member, With this, you kind of alluded to it with not being able to get to cross from Canada to here. So we're living through the circumstances of the COVID 2020, which was not anybody's vision of 2020, right? So with that being said, can you say anything about instrumentation findings that you've seen and immune system and COVID and all of that?
Absolutely. You know, when we first came, well, I mean, chiropractic, not CLA, but when chiropractic first, was confronted with where do we sit with COVID as it came out, the big message that was being built was, hey, back in the in the Spanish flu, there was the relationship of chiropractic and anecdotally people, having a better outcome. Who were being adjusted and had the Spanish flu. Right. And what that really triggered in that non-creative group that I was talking about were this thing of saying, wait a minute, there's no hard evidence that says that chiropractic and immunity are indeed of the same realm. And that's just not true. There's tons of hard evidence, but there isn't necessarily a double-blind study that says when we do an adjustment, we see this, this, and this. However, the one thing that is 100%, regardless of immunity, that is 100% defensible in every time is that chiropractic improves adaptability. And having a vivid and capable immune system is a subset of an adaptive response. You have to live in your environment, and one of the ways in which we live in our environment is, Fred Barge, is the reality that we have to be able to interpret ourselves in our environment and respond to it. Our immune response is deeply tied to adaptability. Well, one of the things that we know for sure is that if somebody is sympathetic dominant and lives in a sympathetic dominant state, two things are guaranteed, studied in the literature and otherwise. And so you could do some deductive reasoning to get you there pretty quickly. And that would be that when somebody is in a sympathetic dominant state, for sure, by the way, staying there, they are pro-inflammatory and reduced immune responsive. And so that is studied and everybody knows that. So if you find by looking at somebody that they are SD and you adjust them, and we know over and over and over again under using our technology and otherwise, is that when you put people under a chiropractic care model, they move to a less sympathetic dominant state. That's a guarantee, and they have a higher heart rate variability. Well, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that that immunity and inflammatory response means that they're in a more adaptive state. Guess what COVID did? So COVID pushed everybody into a sympathetic dominant state. They became massively fatigued. They became immediately sympathetic dominant, but then as this thing has lingered and gone on, they become parasympathetic unbalanced, which means they're adrenally insufficient, which means that they're now not even responsive. And you see this because people are dulling out. They're accepting the status quo. The fight is gone from them. So it's one thing to have fight flight, which is sympathetic dominant. And that's a very positive response when you're confronted with it. It's not positive when it becomes long-term, and then it blunts everything. So in the early stages of stress, we have a sympathetic dominant and a weakened parasympathetic response that shifts over time to have a lower heart rate variability, a lower adrenal responsiveness, which means that you are now parasympathetically slightly dominant, but more importantly, sympathetic insufficient. Mm-hmm. So you're not even reacting to stress. So we are seeing people vacillating in this realm. Danny, here's the other one that we're seeing, which you haven't seen before, and our clients, remember, we have 10,000 clients across the globe, if not more. So we're getting data from huge tranches of people looking at it. EMG total energy scores are going down, down, down. And you might think, well, that's interesting because they're not fighting. No, they're getting so exhausted that we're starting to see yellow now as a predominant coloration on the EMGs. And so that means that they aren't just into a low arousal state that we saw in the HRV, they're now becoming physically exhausted with this perpetual noise in their ear. They haven't adapted yet. And the final thing that we do is that we add in a thermal scan, and that will be reactive to people sort of deepening in their sick modeling, but we're adding those three scores together. And so the general metric we're seeing, and we'll do a scrape on this over millions of scans, is that we're going to see that COVID starts in March 8th, 2020, and we're going to be able to see the core score which is the combination of the HRV, EMG, and the thermals. And we're going to track that, but my gut tells me we're going to see a lowering of that general population HRV and core score over that time.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, as you know, in Colorado, and some people don't know this, we were one of 2 states in the U.S. that had to close our offices. That the governor's order was to close, and we closed our office for 6 weeks. And I got to tell you, as a provider of care, that was painful. It was like, felt like this is when your practitioners needed you more than ever, and you were like handcuffed, you know. So to not deliver the goods, right, and be there for them. When we came back and we were practicing, we did instrumentation. We had retests on lots of people. And I saw, I mean, we're just one office, but the amount of HRV shifted over to fight or flight, everybody was way over for, you know, every scan, because we did re-exams on everybody. Oh, we haven't checked you in 6 weeks. Let's do it. And they had re-exams that were due while we were closed. And so we were just re-examining everybody. And the amount of people that we've seen 5, 10 years that were always in just wonderful readings, were in sympathetic shift, were outrageous. And it was really wonderful to see them be able to bounce back. You know, to see them bounce back quicker, and which ones did and didn't. And then again, how do I serve these people even better, and what can I do differently for the ones that aren't bouncing back as quickly?
Yeah, you nailed it. And, you know, I'll just tell you anecdotally that we ran the last total solution in Colorado, March 5th to 8th, and it closed. Wow. I was on a plane going home from Denver on March the 8th, and they literally shut you guys down on March the 9th, which was the end of that whole thing. So yeah, I empathize tremendously. And of course in Canada, we had a similar to Colorado type of shutdown. And so around the world, we're starting to see let's talk to the positive now. One of the things that's all positive, but one of the things that has forced chiropractors to really rearrange their thinking and their conversation is this whole idea of what do we do with the adjustment. And when you brought it out perfectly, we re-examine, we retest so that we have a fresh and worldly view of what is going on with that person, that patient, that practice member, you know, where they sit in this realm. And we become their trusted advisor, not in healthcare, but in adaptive care. And what I mean by healthcare, of course it's healthcare because we're dealing in human health, but not limited to the pathology of health, but talking about the salutogenic modeling, which is arousal. And this is what I really want our listeners to think about, is that the value of an adjustment isn't about taking away. Sure, we have to remove, if you would, a subluxation responsiveness, but we don't do that necessarily by trying to take away a subluxation as we more arouse an innate responsiveness. And I'll you know, and I know we're tight on time and everything else, but the realities is that you brought up toughness and what Donnie was doing with toughness. And I was trained in toughness as well. And one of the things that is brilliant about harmonics is that it's looking at this tonality that's associated. And when you were using toughness, you know, and you were, you know, managing along looking at the harmonics that were associated with it, one of the things that people would understand is that when tone of the functioning nervous system was disharmonic or was out of ease, if you wanted to say, it was obvious when you made an adjustment, a true adjustment, that things came to ease. And so it's not surprising that HRV levels out and gets better. It's not surprising that EMGs come to a more coherent state. It's not surprising that patterns in thermography break up and reorganize when you adjust somebody's central nervous system.
Yes, absolutely. And disease is, and what you said about healthcare and more that we're at, it's, the thing is, upstepping organization that we as said in the Triad of Life, that we want to see the human organism at 100% organization, and that, you know, is health, right? And how can we input into the spine, as said, the chiropractor doesn't adjust; they're applying a force that is to entice innate to make a change and then see that organizational capacity shift and improve for the better. And that can be measured. And it doesn't mean just that there was something that was loud that crunched and a joint became unstuck, right?
I mean, it's oh my goodness. I was, I don't get hung up on social media, but I was flipping through social last night as you and I were getting organized for this thing. And I came across somebody in California had done this new video that they were putting out, which was called Bad Back Guys or something.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Oh my goodness. And, listen, it was kind of a fun thing to watch and everything else with it. But the outcome and the intent was, let me snap your neck. Let me make some noise in your spine. And look, it's not surprising that people, in other professions or on the public side, look at that and kind of go, well, not at that guy, but I'm talking about the outcome that's affiliated with noise of popping spines, kind of look at that and go, really? You built a profession on that? That's not what we do, or not what we're limited to doing. And I think that as we cycle back to this whole idea of why we exist 125 years and why we'll look forward to the next 125, it's because we understand those principles of coherence, of reorganization. We respect and acknowledge the innate capacity of the person, both mind and body, to reorganize to a highest state that it can, to express itself fully. And I think that those are profoundly unmovable foundations. That is what we do. That's not debatable. How we get there is elegant. And if we take the crazy out of it, you know what I mean? If we take the crazy out of it, and I'm all over marketing and everything else, but we take the crazy out of it and we remember that there are eyes on us that aren't looking at us as extreme marketers. That behind voice in the community the best that we can, and I'm not judging anybody, except when you denigrate what it is that we stand for in terms of the sanctity of being an adjustment, not being some type of a snap, pop, and crackle event. It's bigger than that.
And I have to say, with everything that you just shared so well about COVID, adaptability, immune system, HRV, the opportunity for chiropractic to explode, to expand, to help more lives is huge right now with the right messaging. If we're putting out the message of you being able to not be dulled and to be adaptive and to be able to experience life more, we have so much possibility for people to be abundant in practice because they're abundantly serving. And really, I personally see that outcome assessments and showing the person what is going on, because this concept of interference, it's amorphous to a person. We understand it, but to tell someone we want to have no interference, it's saying we want a negative of something they can't see, right? So having to bring that to something that's to life for them is a key for us being able to reach more people and have more people on more tables more often.
Well, listen, the one reason that chiropractors have polarized to things like the snap and the crackle and the pop is because it's some form of saying we did something.
Right.
And the reality is that with instrumentation that we've described here, you take the invisible and make it visible.
Yes.
And that is the key for the biggest important discussion that you can then open up with your patients or practice members. I call them patients because many times they're still in the medical model, but they become our people when they become practice members. Right. And the realities is that as they become practice members, they see the power of this change happening visibly. For the first time, they're not caught up in saying, how do you feel? It's how do you function? Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, we don't have to rely upon those snap, crackle, pop moments. We just do as we do. And you're not trapped in becoming, and I've always said this in my classes, is that you're not trapped in becoming a therapist. You now become what you choose to be, whether you defer to being a doctor, a trusted advisor, or their friend. I don't, know which one you want to position yourself as. I choose trusted advisor because my role is to adjust them so that they make better choice. One of those being adjusted regularly for life.
And I'm really glad that you said about practice member. A lot of people use that term. Donnie, my dad, he came up with that term. He
I know.
used the phrase practice member, but so people just call everybody a practice member. They're not. I use the term new patient prospect, and then new patient, and then they've got to become a practice member that they engage in a certain stage of the healing process. They get to that, and that you said visible to invisible, and the invisible to visible. You probably know this book, or many of our listeners may not. I've read this book over and over again, Selling the Invisible. If you haven't read it, you need to read that. It's a marketing book, and it's talking about service industry and how you have to make that most of what we do in marketing a service is invisible, and you have to make it visible to people. And what chiropractors really need to be able to do that.
Look, our vision at CLA is for everybody to elevate their excellence. That's our first goal. In other words, how you get there is your choice. But what we want them to know is that we stand for chiropractic alongside everybody like yourself and the teams and the people we hang out with. But our goal isn't we know that our business is a byproduct of one thing, and that's elevating the excellence within chiropractic. Okay. And to do that, our mission is to, and I'll use the term we said, is to make the invisible visible, and we do that through technology. Now, I want probably everybody who listens to this podcast has heard of CLA or otherwise, but I want everybody to think why they shouldn't be scanning. Why is it that you're not scanning? Because we've refined it so much now that we're absolutely at the top of the game when it comes to instrumentation. We're sort of peerless when it comes in our profession to study the relationship of spinal neurology and general neurology as it relates to the subluxation. And so when we scan people, it's instantaneous now. We do it off of iPads. We allow ourselves to work with the cloud. We can customize anything we want within the reporting models. Danny, you probably don't even know this because I was going to, show it off at Mile High, but we're just at that point where you can combine and get up to 20 new reports, which are written in language that is associated with the evidence-based data that we're producing. And it's not based on pathology, it's based on our conversation we're having today. So, it's awesome. And we've tried to make it so that everybody can have that affordability and otherwise. So there's no reason not to.
And when you're living in a world that, for example, people are wearing wearable tech, such as a Apple Watch, or I have a Whoop here for HRV. Like people, if you have the conversation about your care about that level, there are people that understand that. And those are some of your ideal target market people, because they want to be performing at their optimum. They're measuring it on their wrist every day, and give a way you can do it in their office. That's huge. If people want to connect more with CLA, how can they do that?
Absolutely. Well, you know what? One of the easiest ways is to go to insightcla.com. Insight is the name of the technology, insightcla.com. And when they go there, I think that one of the things I've had the most fun doing is we've got 4 success stories on the homepage. And so if they just click on the success stories tab, there's 4 quick under a minute interviews of people that have used our technology the way you and I do, Dan. And as a result of that, if they want to get to know us a little more, insightcla.com, and then just go to success stories. It's a wonderful journey to try and understand. We have New Zealand, we've got people from Canada, people from the US doing family-based practice, doing general practice. It's wonderful. So I'd love them to go and take a look at it there.
Outstanding. And again, I'm so grateful for everything that CLA does for chiropractic, for chiropractors, chiropractic teams, and most importantly, the people that we serve, because you help people deliver better care, in my view. And then ultimately, that is about the people on the tables in people's offices, which really need outstanding service and deserve that from chiropractic. So thank you for everything that you do and give to chiropractic.
You are welcome. I'll finish by just pointing up here to Dee Dee. So yesterday, this is a little bit of interest, is that Dee Dee, born Canadian, and they had originally thought genealogically that he was from what was called Port Perry, same district. But over the years, we started to realize that that was just a little off. They actually put a national park, a monument there and everything else about Dee Dee. But we did find out found some old records from 1847 when he was born, that he was actually born just a little south of Port Perry and a little bit to the west, which was exactly where my office was in that whole area. My sister's farm is literally on the next corner from Dee Dee's home of where it was born, and my office was just south of that. Completely happenstance. That's just outside of Toronto for those people that are interested.
Very
but
cool.
Just an interesting little thing, and they renamed, and they just put a plaque up yesterday celebrating from 125 years the repositioning of Dee Dee's home birth.
Very cool. And thank you again, and thank you for all you do to support Mile High as well. And because our visions are aligned, no pun intended. And we'll also remind everybody, mark your calendar, June, not August, June 3rd to 6th. So we look forward to seeing you in 2021. Be at Mile High, and you can get all the details at milehighchiroregistration.com. We're going to be doing something new and exciting, and please check out CLA and use outcome assessments in practice. Whatever type of outcome assessments that are related to spinal neural integrity you want to use, it will help you be a better chiropractor and change more spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.
Love it.